permission to celebrate this matter, and that the lawful aspirations of the faithful who asked their bishops for celebrations of it were often frustrated and almost never genuinely fostered. With his new norms, Pope Benedict also recognizes that many bishops have not allowed wide and generous access to the old form that the late Pope John Paul II had encouraged in his motu proprio Ecclesia Dei Afflicta of 1988. Citing St. Paul's words from the second letter to the Corinthians, the Holy Father now exhorts all bishops, let us generously open our hearts and make room for everything that the faith itself allows. But Pope Benedict goes beyond exhortation. He establishes the rights of the faith in terms of canon law, the law of the Church. This then is not another indult or special permission, it is much more than that. Every single priest has the right to use what is now to be known as the extraordinary form of the Roman Rite, and the lay faithful, for their part, have the right to request it. The Holy Father recognizes that those who are attached to the older liturgical forms are not only people who grew up with them. Today, more than 40 years after Vatican II, many younger people have come to know and appreciate the old Mass. This is not just nostalgia. It is a real love for the Church's liturgical tradition which nourishes and sustains their Christian lives. For the sake of brevity, I'm not going to spell out the norms laid down by the Holy Father. There has been ongoing coverage of these in both the Catholic and the secular media, though it needs to be said that some of this coverage has not been reliable. No doubt, the motu proprius and moral pontificum is a defining moment in the pontificate of Benedict XVI. As already said, the theme of this document and of the explanatory letter is reconciliation. Reconciliation of the Church with her own tradition. For years and years it was insinuated that those who were attached to these older forms were disobedient. Even from a merely psychological point of view, such a rejection of one's own past must have disastrous effects. The Catholic Bishop of Eichstätt in Germany, in his statement welcoming this papal document, says that we must overcome the liturgical Oedipus complex. The liturgical Oedipus complex from which the life of the Church has suffered for decades, that is, the rejection, sometimes even going to hatred, of that which our ancestors considered most holy. Pope, as the universal pastor of the Church, sees this problem very clearly. He writes, what earlier generations held as sacred remains sacred, great for us too, and it cannot be all of a sudden entirely forbidden or even considered harmful. It behooves all of us to preserve the riches which have developed in the Church's faith and prayer, and to give them their proper place. With this motu proprio, the Pope wishes to put a stop to the self-destructive forces within the Church. It is a fact that the Catholic Church is not in good shape. The Catholic liturgy is not in good shape today. Not everywhere, not in every parish, not in every community, but on balance and in every corner of the world. The Pope is very frank about this when he speaks of deformations of the liturgy which were hard to bear, and then adds on a very personal note, I'm speaking from experience, since I too lived through that period with all its hopes and its confusion. And I have seen how arbitrary deformations of the liturgy caused deep pain to individuals totally rooted in the faith of the Church. These personal words of the Supreme Pastor of the Church, should be taken seriously. They echo what Joseph Ratzinger said about the present crisis of the liturgy before his election to the See of Peter. He repeatedly called for a wider use of the old liturgy and for a reform of the reform. The motu proprio will achieve the former, no doubt, and I'm convinced it will also initiate the latter. The difficulty with the reform of the Reform project is that the liturgy, as the Pope says, is never made or fabricated. It develops, grows, quasi-organically. As much as a reform of the reform is necessary and desirable, it cannot be made or fabricated either. There is the danger that a reform of the reform would make similar mistakes to those made by the reformers of the 60s and 70s. A liturgical rite is not earned by one generation and can therefore not be altered in an arbitrary fashion. As Joseph Ratzinger wrote shortly before his elevation to the See of Peter, liturgy is not made, not even by a pope, but with respect to the liturgy, the Pope has the task of the gardener, not that of a technician who builds new machines and throws the old ones on the junk pile in imitation. With this motu proprio, Benedict XVI has shown himself as a prudent and gentle gardener, gardening the vineyard of the Lord, providing it with water and nourishment, allowing it to grow, pruning it here and there. The 1962 Missal will be brought back right into the centre of the Church's life as the extraordinary form of the Roman Rite, while the Missal of Paul VI will remain the ordinary form of that same rite. Holy Father notes that the two forms of the usage of the Roman Rite can be mutually enriching. He suggests that new prefaces and celebrations of some new saints can and should be added to the 1962 Missal. In fact, the 4 centuries between St. Pius V and Blessed John XXIII saw the addition of a number of prefaces to the Missal, and during these 4 centuries the saints' calendar was changed many times, hence such development, as envisaged by Benedict XVI, would be another step towards normality. The Holy Father goes on to say, the celebration of the Mass according to the Missal of Paul VI will be able to demonstrate more powerfully than has been the case hitherto the sacrality which attracts many people to the formal usage. Okay? This is very significant. If indeed the celebration of the ordinary form of the Roman Rite is more and more inspired and formed by the sacred and stable character of the extraordinary form, then that reform of the Reform about which Father Fessio writes in his preface to Martin Mosebach's book will be well on its way. And I have the pleasure now to hand over to Mr. Mosebach to read from a chapter of Heresy.
My Reverend Fathers, ladies and gentlemen, first of all I would like to thank Father Cutler, our host this evening, and I thank also the Society of St. Hugh of Cluny, which has invited me, and Father Lang for his kind words. My book, Heresy of Formlessness, has various chapters, various essays. It's a collection inspired by the philosopher, as Father Lang said, the philosopher Robert Spreemann, my old friend. And there are an essay, Does Christianity Need a Liturgy? Then is an essay on the iconoclasm in the Catholic Church after the Second Vatican Concile, and an essay